What up, Gripsters and random YouTubers? Evan here for Grips.com, and in today's video I am going to be talking about how to have the perfect practice session. I know it said I had a video coming out very soon on how to have the perfect study session, but I realized that, learning how to study is very important, but some of us, we need to learn how to play properly and how to approach a playing session first before we even get to the studying side of things. Because if you're not executing proper practice and due diligence when you're engaging in your sessions, there's no point in studying anyway, because all the hard work you do away from the table is going to be completely useless for you if you aren't performing at a good level and with the right intentions when you do hit the tables. So I made a list of 6 points to follow to make a perfect practice session so that your practice can make you perfect. So how to study poker. First thing you need to do is prepare for your sessions. A lot of times we just kind of roll out of bed, fire up the tables, or we're having a bad day, so we drive off and rush to the casino to kind of escape everything. And that is not the right approach for a poker session. You really want to have an intention for your session. The best way to prepare for your sessions is fourfold. First, you want to mentally get prepared. For me, this means either reading a little bit of poker literature or doing some research on a particular poker concept so that I can have my mind in poker mode before I start playing, so it's easy to just transition into the poker flow state. It is very important, though, to not try to overlearn or take in too much information before you play, because then you're going to feel overwhelmed and think about all these many things you have to do when really you just need to show up and play poker, be in a poker mindset. It's important to get prepared physically, depending on how long the session's going to be. Maybe you want to get really amped up, or maybe you want to get really calm. The important thing is to take care of your body so that it's not going to be bugging you, being antsy, being anxious or anything like that while you're playing. If you have your leg can't stop going while you're sitting and trying to play poker, it's because you have extra tension that needs to be released. If you exercise before you play your session, you can come to the table calm and relaxed and have a much better performance. Emotionally, you need to get prepared for your sessions, and this means bringing no baggage with you to the table. So if you just got in a fight with someone, you probably shouldn't play poker. If you have things that are on your mind that are stressing you out, you probably shouldn't play poker. If there's just any emotional issues going on, being in an environment where there are a lot of things that are outside of your control, that can be very stressful things, is probably not the place that you want to put yourself. So make sure that the emotional stuff is in check before you sit down at the table. And finally, have a purpose or an intention or a why for the session. What is the reason that you're sitting down to play poker today? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to develop? What are you trying to experience? Have this in your mind before you play, and that way when you play your session, you're going to manifest that which you wanted, as opposed to just kind of being at the will of whatever the table, whatever the game's going to give you. By having an intention, a purpose for playing, you come to the game with a lot more power and a lot more control out of the outcome, and are much more likely to have a positive experience from playing poker than you would when it's kind of all left up to the poker gods and variants and whatnot. So it's important to get these 4 things down, preparing mentally, physically, emotionally, and I call it spiritually, because if you don't do these things before your session, you are basically wasting your time, you are wasting your money, and you are wasting your energy when you sit down at the poker table, and you are going to experience completely pointless and needless frustration. So prepare for your sessions properly so that you are not wasting your time, your money, or your energy. Another way of thinking about this is to forget about the money and focus on the mindset. Okay? Forget about the money when you're playing poker. Just focus on the mindset. And then you will be able to be much more powerful before you come to the table. And you'll find that you aren't so stressed out. When you focus on the money before your session, you can get anxious, you can get nervous, you can get scared. When you just focus on the mindset, you can almost guaranteed to come in there feeling like a winner. All right, number 2, get quality practice. You want to be positive or you are going to be powerless. And what I mean by this is that when you're in a neutral or a negative mind state, you don't feel like you have much control about what's going on in the world or your environment or your surroundings. And basically they're going to impact you, and you're going to be stuck in the same thought patterns, feeling powerless. But when you get into a positive mindset, one that has an elevated mood, I learned this from Dr. Joe Dispenza, that's when changes can happen in the brain, when you can create new connections, new behaviors, new attitudes. And that's why coming into your sessions and coming into your days with a positive mindset is way more powerful than coming in with a neutral, a disinterested, or a negative mindset, one that leaves you very powerless. And basically you will get 10 times the effectiveness at minimum if you come in with a positive mindset and maintain a positive mindset as opposed to a non-one. And this is why having a dream or a vision to work towards can be so powerful, because when you know you're working towards something that you dreamed about, that you've desired for so long and that you want so bad, you're going to do anything to get it. And you're going to deal with the ups and downs and the discomforts that come with the tough times in poker, and you're going to push through them. And you're going to enjoy the process so much more because you're like, you know what, this is going to make me a stronger person, more well-rounded, and I'm going to be more prepared for my victory when that opportunity finally presents itself to me. Whereas if you don't have that positive mindset, when the going gets tough, you know, you're just going to get out of there. When you take a bad beat, you're going to quit, or you're going to tilt, or you're going to do something you shouldn't do because you're just like, well, screw it. What was the point of all this anyway? And you just experience a bad attitude. So by having a positive mindset before you get in and during your sessions, you're going to be able to get so much more out of the experience because you're going to be enjoying it, and you're going to be open and intrigued and curious as to what's going on. Basically, when you're in a positive mindset, everything opens up. Your perspective opens up and you see more possibilities, more opportunities. Whereas when you have kind of a neutral or a negative mindset, it's very closed, it's very limited, and you miss out on a lot of the good stuff. So to get quality practice, be positive or be powerless. You want to be focused, intentional, present, and not distracted while you're playing poker. It's been said that to learn something takes about 300 to 400 reps before it goes from you got to think about it, the conscious mind, to just the unconscious competence, you just get it. But it takes 3,000 to 5,000 repetitions to unlearn something and relearn a new habit. So recognize that when you are playing poker, when you are practicing, every time you sit down, you are training your brain. You are teaching it habits. And you might as well teach it the good habits from the get-go, because it's a lot easier to get it the first time on 300 to 400 repetitions than it is to have to go through that process of unlearning it and relearning the new things, which takes 3,000 to 5,000 repetitions. So you do it right the first time, you're going to be saving a lot of time in the long run. And like I said, yeah, learning is much easier than unlearning and relearning. So be positive, be passionate, and be excited to just practice. Just practice. Another way to look at this is to just forget about the skrill and just focus on developing, your skill and your reads and all that, and enjoy the process. Okay, number 3, also on that topic of forgetting about skrill and focusing on skill. Acknowledge that the pregame and the postgame is actually more important than the poker game. Because when you get the pregame right, the actual during the game is very automatic and it's very easy. And when you get the postgame right, you turn those losses into learning experiences, and you turn those wins into memories that you will cherish for a long time and be able to look back at them as positive anchor points and experiences to be like, hey, I did that once, I could do it again. So getting your pregame right. Practice in your mind all the things that you want to do, your game selection, you're easing into the flow, you're making good decisions, you're paying attention, you're calculating the pot odds, you're thinking about your opponent's range. The more you do stuff in your mind and practice it, the easier it is to do it in reality, because your brain's like, oh, I already did this. I'm just doing what I already did last night or what I already did this morning. So the more you can practice it and the more vivid you can get with it, the more details you can get with it, the better. Now, one thing is people hear, practice visualizing for poker. Well, how do I visualize winning? Because a lot of it has to do with the cards, and I can't control the cards. Don't worry about visualizing the winning. Visualize the actions that you would have to take to play your best poker session. How are you sitting? What did you eat before you play? What are you listening to? What else is in the room with you? What else is on the screen? Are you focused? Are you distracted? What kind of music is playing? How are you staying in the zone? How are you keeping your energy levels up? Are you prepared to quit at the right time? Little things like this. If you practice this, the results will be automatic and very easy. And those are things that you have full control over. So visualize practicing the things that you can control. Also, practice the things that no one talks about practicing. The really, really important things that, seem minor but add up to a huge amount of money at the end of the day, the end of the month, the end of the year. Practice quitting. When you feel yourself falling off your A game, practice just getting up from the computer, closing it down, and say, you know what, I'm done for the day. I'm going to go do something else to recenter, recharge. Practice disconnecting from poker. At the end of your session, just saying, okay, that was fun, but now it's done. I'm going to come back to these hands later, and I'm just going to enjoy the rest of my night doing whatever it is that I do, instead of letting those thoughts run rampant throughout your mind all night long, keeping you from sleeping. Practice natural discovery. Practice, learning new things, being open to feedback, being open to new lines of thought. Practice experimentation. Practice getting a little bit out of your comfort zone and working on the edge, because that's where the real growth happens. What else we got? Schedule. Yes, on the importance of post-game. Scheduling your study time. We all like to plan when we're going to play, but we rarely plan when we're going to study. And study is just as important, if not more important than playing, because when you study, you are increasing your hourly rates. It's kind of like getting an item that gives a +1 to all skills. When you actually study properly, you're refining those connections in your brain so that you're going to have a better poker mind. You're doing it in a stress-free environment where you're actually open to making changes, as opposed to the feeling of being under pressure where I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because it's keeping me alive. And yeah, you will also see different ways of looking at things. That's where studying really, really helps a ton. So make sure you schedule that study time, because it's just as important, if not more important, than your actual play time. And ask players like Fedor Holtz about this. You'll see just what I'm talking about. Number 4, make reflecting and reviewing automatic, because this is what sets up the opportunity for change, the opportunity for growth, the opportunity for development into becoming that perfect poker player. And the way to do this is simply mark your hands while you're playing. If you have Poker Tracker, you can just click the little tab at the top, mark hand for review. If you don't have Poker Tracker, you can write down, the cards you had and maybe the board you had in a quick note so you can review it later. If you don't do this while you're playing, it's much harder to do it after the fact. Whereas if you mark the hands while you're playing, then when you go through your database later, your Poker Tracker, all the hands for review are right there, and it makes it much easier, and it makes it much more likely you will do this thing that is of very high value to you, that is hard to prioritize, that is hard to say, hey, I want to do this. So make it easy. Make the hard things easy, and that ensures that they will happen, and that ensures you'll get the results that you want. So the best way to review is to review them when you're in a fresh and stable state. Reviewing right after the session, not the best thing to do. You're kind of tired from playing. You might be bitter about something that happened. You're really holding on to a way you played a hand, and you're just not going to be open. Get some food in your belly, get a good night's sleep, get a good laugh in with some friends, then come back to study, because you will be excited about studying. You will be in that positive state for studying, and you will get those positive changes to happen because your brain and your being are ready for them. Next step for reviewing, review with a poker friend you respect, because the whole point of reviewing is to get different perspectives on things so you can look at things in a different way and see if maybe you missed something. Reviewing a session when you're in a calm state as opposed to when you were under pressure from having to make decisions, time banks running out, will give you a different perspective for sure. But the best way to get a different perspective is to just have a completely different set of eyes look at the situation and tell you what they think. But do it with someone you respect, someone who you think thinks about the game well, because you're more likely to get constructive feedback from them as opposed to feedback that's limited in its understanding of the game and may not be on kind of the level that you think you're on. And the third way you can get good value from your reviewing is posting in a forum. But if you're going to do this, if you're going to post in a forum, Include all the relevant information. Because when you just say, I had this hand, here's the board, what do I do? There's so much that's missing. You know, what position were you in? What position was the opponent in? What range of hands do you think they're playing? What range are you playing? Are they aggressive? Are they passive? Are they up? Are they down? Are they tilting? Are they stable? How many players are left in the tournament? How many places are paid? How fast is the structure of the tournament? How long have you been playing? What's your image at the table? What's the other player's image? What's their perception of you? These are all factors that are really important in a poker hand and show you just the multitude of variables that are there. The more of this you can include in your forum post, the more likely you are to get a very thorough response that considers all the information, because the person who's reading your post, they weren't there when you played the hand. They don't know all the stuff that was going on. But the more details you can include so that they can kind of put themselves in the place and kind of put themselves in your shoes and kind of feel all the things that were going on, all the variables that were going on, the more likely they will be to be able to give you a really high quality response, which is what you want, because that's what's going to lead to, you know, positive change. So, and then you can go deeper into your analysis, which I have as number 5, and that's using programs like Flopzilla, ICMizer, Poker Tracker, Leak Finder, or filters. And I'm going to do another video on studying specifically and how to use these programs, so I'll just be brief. Flopzilla should be used to look at your opponent's range on a board and seeing how much of their range is going to fold to a certain action you're taking, being it a lead, a check raise, a multi-barrel, you name it, and seeing if their folding frequency, based on the hands they're going to continue with versus the hands they're going to fold, is high enough that you're meeting the break-even success rate for the amount that you are risking in terms of your bet size. So you're comparing how often does my bet need to work based on the odds that I'm laying my opponent and getting on the pot, and how much of his range do I think my opponent is folding. Is he folding more than he needs? I'm making money. Is he folding less than I need? I'm losing money. That is the best way to use Flopzilla for a new Flopzilla user. And if you need more info on break-even success ratios, check out my book, The Cash Game Crash Course. I go very in-depth in that. Programs like ICMizer, fantastic for tournament spots. They'll tell you, based on what your opponents are calling with, in terms of what hands they're calling shoves with, how wide you can shove all in. And you can see if a shove was too loose or too tight. And you also get to see all the hands that are profitable. So you might say, wow, I didn't realize how many hands I could shove in this spot. I can really open up my game and open up my range in this particular spot. That's the way that ICMizer is most useful, but we'll get into more detail in a future video. And then Poker Tracker, Leak Finder, and you can use filters in Poker Tracker to say, I just want to see my 3-bet pots. I just want to see how I'm doing when I defend the big blind. I just want to see how I'm doing when I'm playing in position. These will allow you to really kind of drill in on areas of your game where you may be leaking money, when your overall game may be strong. It's important to find those little leaks, because once you plug them, then you're just going to be cruising along and your ship is not going to be sinking. So another way to think about points 4 and 5, the importance of reflecting and reviewing and getting deeper into your analysis, is to, forget about variance, because your sessions are going to go like this, and we usually just focus on our Poker Tracker graph and see how we did. Forget about variance and just focus on developing the skills for victory. And that way, when you experience positive variance, you're going to get the most out of it. And when you experience negative variance, you're going to lose the minimum to it. And finally, we have number 6, which is a really good piece of advice I wish someone had taught me when I started. And that's save the stat check for once a month. It's really easy. It's really addictive to have your Poker Tracker graph open while you're playing and see kind of how you're doing, seeing if you're peaking or valleying and all that. And it's just unnecessary anxiety for the mind, because it's like, oh man, like I need to be doing my best, and every time I'm not doing my best, I'm doing bad. And it's constant negative feedback that's coming in that is not accurate, because your Poker Tracker graph includes a lot of variance in it, a lot of the luck, and it's not purely reflective of your skill. So if you're judging your results based on if your graph is high, you're doing great, and if it's low, you're doing poorly, that's just inaccurate. And again, it's developing bad habits that you're going to have to unlearn later. So just save the stat check for once a month, because if you're focusing on developing the skill set, then how much you're up or down doesn't really matter if you're playing well and you're learning from the mistakes you're making. If you're going to be experimenting and developing your game and finding new lines and stuff, there's going to be a learning period where you're probably going to be losing. You don't want to feel doubly bad about losing because you're trying new things. Because when you get those new things, your winnings are going to be double, triple what they were when you just lived in the box and played a very safe, solid, secure style. So just don't check the graph until once a month, so that you can focus on what's important and not what's irrelevant. Basically, checking the graph regularly, daily, hourly is a waste of time, energy, and thought, and it's going to put a lot of unnecessary chatter in your brain, which is going to drown out your ability to just make high-quality poker decisions, which is what you should be doing anyway. So a big thing with the graph, again, is focusing and worrying about what you can't control, which is a bad habit. It's a very disempowering habit, and it's the wrong way to think about things. Focus on what you can control and let God or whatever you believe in take care of the rest. Really good way to get peace of mind. And the other thing is, like, when you're checking the graph after every session, ask yourself, could I be doing something more beneficial with this time, and maybe something less stressful and something more happiness inspiring with this time? And if the answer is yes, then you should be doing that other thing instead of checking your graph. And another way of looking at this, another way of thinking about this or reframing it, because I know I used to obsess about my graph a lot and obsess about my poker a lot, is to forget about losing sessions by simply focusing on how lucky you are to be alive and to be breathing. Because at the end of the day, poker's just a game, and it's just a part of your life. It's not your entire life. And the very fact that you get to be alive and breathing means you can experience so many other great things. And when you remind yourself about what's possible and what different experiences you could be having, it gets you in that positive state, and it gets you motivated to perform your best, to play your best, and practice your best so that you can practice until you make your game damn near perfect. Now, I'll go through the list one more time, and then I'm going to go through my personal poker bad habits to show you guys I'm not perfect. I've made a ton of mistakes too, and I've had to unlearn a lot of these things that I learned unnecessarily by focusing on the wrong things and listening to the wrong people. And so first I'll go through the list of 6 things. Prepare for your sessions. Get quality practice. Be positive or be powerless. Acknowledge that the pregame and the postgame is more important than the poker game. Make reflecting and reviewing automatic by marking hands. Go deeper into your analysis, and save the stat check for once a month at most. And now, to be completely honest with you guys, I'm going to go through my bad poker habits that I learned over my 10-year career and had to unlearn in the last 2 years to be able to reach my full potential as a poker player. They are in no specific order. Needing to have a winning session. Needing my poker tracker graph to be at its peak. Moving up limits to chase losses. Adding more tables so that I could get all the dead money and be sitting in all the games that had the fish, because I couldn't miss a table that had a weak player, even if they only had a 15 big blind stack. Playing more tables and longer hours than I should have instead of respecting my rhythms and my focus levels. Focusing on volume and quantity over learning and quality. That is a big one, and that's why some players excel so quickly, thinking I needed to play perfect every time. Thinking that mistakes were not allowed, that they weren't okay. Only looking at the biggest winning and losing pots when doing my reviews, because I didn't mark down during the session every time I felt uncomfortable or unsure about a spot, so what other hands would I review except the biggest ones? They must have had the biggest effect on my session. Most of the time your big pots are just coolers that completely came down to luck. And it's the little spots that you're missing out on. You should mark every time you feel unsure about a situation, that's the hand you mark down for review and that you want to ask your friend for others' opinions on. Not being open and accepting of feedback and criticism and thinking that I could figure it out all on my own. Not expanding my circle of friends or influencers to expand my perspective, expand my possibilities, and just expand my experience. Classifying myself. I thought of myself as a mid-stakes cash reg, which limited my experience. When I say I'm a mid-stakes cash reg, well, now I can't play high stakes. Or now it's a waste of my time to play small stakes, which is a great place to experiment. Or I can't really play tournaments because I'm a cash reg. So classifying myself as anything beyond someone who enjoys playing poker is a very limiting way of thinking. Being afraid of or unwilling to experiment with new things, largely in part because I didn't want to play at a lower limit where I'd be comfortable, messing around, maybe losing some money while I was learning new things that would pay off in other situations later. Obsessing over my hourly rates, basically thinking too much about money instead of thinking about the mindset and thinking about the skill development. Building on this, refusing to take a day off and being too attached to the routine. I said Fridays are the juicy day, I got to play every Friday. Sundays are tournament day, I got to play every Sunday. I missed out on a lot of experiences with friends and family because I'm like, nope, I can't miss a day. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. The games will always be there. There'll always be more poker to play. But those special days, those special moments that come around once in a while, you can't relive those. And you definitely want to be there when they happen. Those are the things you will look back on fondly in life, not just your biggest winning sessions. Hero worshipping. Only wanting to learn from the best players and not realizing that I could learn from those who are less experienced as well. You can learn from everyone. You can learn from people who have played more than you. You can learn from people who play less than you, because it's all about getting more perspectives. The more perspectives, the more way of looking at things you have, the better you are going to understand something. And the whole point of studying poker is to deepen your understanding, expand your awareness, and to eliminate bad habits. And the more perspectives you can have for that, the better. You can learn from people who are weaker players by saying, oh, what are all the bad habits they have that I want to make sure that I don't have in my game? That's just one example. Trying to solve the game, this is a big one for the analytically inclined out there, instead of trying to simply see new perspectives and embrace the infinite nature of the game. Poker is, a card game played with human beings. There's a large psychological element, and emotions are infinite and unpredictable and often irrational, and that's what creates all the infinite complexities of the game. We're not playing against machines, we're not playing against robots, so there is not one simple, true solution. Get creative. Get outside the box. It's more fun and more profitable. Being too rigid in thoughts and behaviors, thinking there was only one true right way to play. And not trusting myself and allowing the flow state to take over. So I basically restricted my ability to get into flow state because I was trying to follow a blueprint, or I was thinking that I wasn't allowed to just do it my way, do it what felt naturally, because I thought I might get judged, I might get made fun of for doing something that was unorthodox, when really if you come up with a play that's very unorthodox, it's going to be hard for your opponent to understand it, and there's probably a reason you came to that conclusion that it was the right play. Just try it. Just try it and have no judgment. You'll be surprised at how often it works. And finally, the last of my bad poker habits of my list from today, because I'm sure I could make 20 of these lists, is getting caught up in the highs and addictive nature of money making. Everyone who's won a tournament knows what I'm talking about. And neglecting to set new long-term goals. Because creating goals allows us to create perspective, to see, how far we've come, and it allows us to celebrate progress. Because without goals, without milestones, without little keepsakes and anchors and experiences to look back on, it all just gets lost in a flow and a hodgepodge of this hand and that hand and the chips flying. And we see that otherwise, without these dividers and these big highlight moments to separate things, the grind is never ending, and it will be very unsatisfying. And that's why it's important to reward yourself for good practice, for good play, and good results. And it gives you something to aspire to. It gives you a new why. It gives you something to work towards. And it gives you something you can get excited about, which is going to keep you in that positive mind state, which is where the change happens, which is where the growth occurs, which is where you unleash the magic within that is that perfect poker player. So that summarizes what to do to have a perfect practice session, what not to do when you're trying to have a perfect practice session, and yeah, why it's important to think of every poker session as simply a practice session and not a final test a final exam. If you think of everything as just a practice, it's a lot easier to just enjoy the experience, to get into flow, and be open to trying new things. If you think that this is the final exam, that it has to be perfect, you're going to feel really limited in your options, in your choices. And you have your entire lifetime to play this game. You have your entire lifetime to develop the skills. So why not go out there, experiment new things, learn new things, reflect on what worked, reflect on what didn't, and really expand your toolbox, expand your understanding, and just become that much more well-rounded of a poker player and that much more dangerous of a poker player. And when you start to look at your sessions that way, and you stop worrying about the skrill, and you just focus on developing on the skill, you stop thinking about that cash, and you just focus on learning how to crush, and you forget about the money and just worry about your mindset. When you start approaching poker in that way, now you're creating the right thoughts, the right pathways, and you're not going to have to do any unlearning or relearning later, because you are going to have learned it right from the first time. And that is really the best way to maximize your hourly, for those of you who think in terms of those terms. So that is how to have the perfect poker practice, and you and I both know that practice makes perfect. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you in your poker development and your path towards becoming the perfect poker player and connecting with the world champion within. Please let me know your thoughts on the video. Get at me in the comments section. And if you're interested in becoming that world champion, then subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I promise I will get you there. And after that's all said and done, I think you guys know what to do. Take what you learned, go out there, and get stacking.